It's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome you to the County of San Mateo's Juneteenth short film screening. For the slaves of Galveston, Texas in 1863, freedom, as you know, was delayed because they had been denied the news that freedom had been given to all slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation. It was only 2 years later, on June 19th, 1865, that the people enslaved in Galveston learned that they were free and that they should have been set free 2 years earlier. The freedom that they first heard about in Galveston on June 19th symbolizes the freedom that we are still working towards today as we advance on our journey to achieve the complete fulfillment of that dream of liberty and justice that the United States of America represents.
The films chosen for us tonight are expressions of the beauty and diversity of Black experiences. They offer an opportunity for us to learn, reflect, be in conversation, and get recommitted to the promise of Juneteenth, liberation.
One, two, three. I heard somebody holler Juneteenth, saying we've been free. Even though they took those shackles off, we ain't been released yet. If we was really free, why they mostly detain our people? Slave catchers traded stallions in for SUVs. You see, there was a man named Willie Lynch, proof that the devil exists, put a plan in motion to enslave us for 400 years. Mental manipulation that still plagues and haunts our nation. Wounds too deep to be wiped clean by emancipation proclamations. You see, he targeted the psyche of the Black family, demasculated fathers out their home, leaving no man to see, and then beat and whipped the mother as they clinged on to their sanity. And now this mixed baby's born into a world cursed with vanity. It was about 1863 when they said they set us free, but 2 years later till we all got the memo. They say the date of June 19th was monumental. They took our chains off, but we're still locked up in prisons of our mental, searching for some purpose or something worth it to live for, facing opposition from the people that this system's really built for. Released from captivity into the heart of a war. Fast forward just a century and a little more, we ain't getting whipped and we for sure ain't picking cotton no more. But damage from our past is what's stopping us from growing. Lies in the schoolhouse is what's stopping us from knowing. Lies on the internet are only getting more potent, and rap music got me thinking that my brother could be my opponent. Even though the bondage on our bodies is clearly broken. As a people, we all will not be free until our minds have been awoken. Awakened from that state of sleep distractions usually bring. The revolution can't be televised when we all watching for the MVP. A wise man once said that history repeats. This time around, let's help one another each. Practice self-care so that you can reach your peak. Pour love into your mental by the media you seek. Add life into your temple by the foods and things you eat. Make sure you asking questions to the info that you read. And once you get yourself unshackled, give your folks the key. Then and only then will we all truly be free.
going to go through several themes, certainly, as I mentioned, from the films that we just watched, but we're also going to tackle some of the conversations around Juneteenth and humanity as it pertains to Blackness in our community. How does Juneteenth relate to the work that you're doing today in your respective spaces of education, the LGBTQ plus community, and also housing and health? And this is for all of you, so please chime in.
One thing about Juneteenth is I do think there's this kind of tension of celebration with yet we have so far to go. And I see that in education a lot. Like, yes, we are no longer segregated, but yet when you go inside of our school walls around this entire country, we're more segregated than we were before. And a lot of people don't know that our students are in separate classes from the rigorous coursework. And so we talk a lot about the general order number 3 coming to say you are, you've been freed, now go forth and prosper. But if you actually read the general order number 3, what it says is that we actually recommend that you stay and work for this person who has enslaved you, who didn't tell you that you were free, or you can leave, but you can't be idle, so you have to work, and you can't look to the military for any support. So you're saying, oh, you're free, but then you give no options or anything. And so I think really understanding stories and understanding counter narratives are really important. And I think that's how I see kind of this relation to education today.
With me being a Black, trans, non-binary person, I get to celebrate Pride Month, celebrate Juneteenth, and my hope is elevate celebration of representation. In some spaces that's maybe a little bit more heteronormative, I may be accepted for the race, but not accepted for the gender identity. When you're looking at Juneteenth, can we look at it more expansively of all people within community, and not just, okay, it's about just Black folks, but it's actually more and more about us that intersect, and we're doing such amazing things. So see us more than just our color or our skin, our race, but see us for the entirety that we bring, especially in the different spaces we're in. I think we are really in a time now where it's fearful more so just to be yourself, and then it's fearful to be yourself as a BIPOC person and expressing your identity in some spaces. And so, Juneteenth is free, but I don't know if I'm all the way free if we were looking at some of my identities. I think in some of my identities, I'm still enslaved. So, hopefully these things change.
I was incarcerated for over 20 years. I got out. It'll be 11 years next month. And my life is never looked back. So in taking all of these things into consideration, what does Juneteenth have to do with a lot of the work that I do? I ask myself the same question on Juneteenth that Frederick Douglass asked about July 4th. What does Juneteenth have to do with the suffering and the death of the person who actually galvanized all the work, and that was the man who died by the hands of the police in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We start seeing laws passed. We start seeing things written into law as holidays that were actually being celebrated way before. But the problem is that it wasn't capitalized. And so my question is it really about celebrating Juneteenth for us, or is it a way to infuse more money into an economic system that is still a part and partial of lobbying for the laws and policies that keep African Americans, LGBTQ, and other people of color down on the equity scale? So I would say that.
Tell us what we're seeing in the education system and how it's been very specific to make sure that Black children Black boys and girls who grow up to become young adults and adults, we hope, are being left behind, and there's a strategic initiative to do it, though it's marketed in a different way?
I'll just start by saying, yes, our Black children, our Black students are not being served by this educational system. We know this, we see it in the data every year. I actually think people are desensitized to the data because it's atrocious data that we just are like, yeah, well, that's what it looks like. But I think people tend to think of like race as like a specific, this person's racist or that person's racist. And I think in education it's really important to understand that it's systemic, the systemic racism that has happened. And one example is just Brown versus Board. When Brown versus Board happened, over 38,000 of our Black educators lost their jobs. So they were fired, they were demoted. The National Education Association did a study and they found that 93% of our Black educators were fired or demoted from all the people that they talked to. So thinking about that, and now we talk about kind of this Black teacher pipeline. We don't have Black teachers, we need Black teachers. Our students need to see themselves in the classroom. They need these people who will affirm them. That's not happening for our students. And so what do? How can we get more Black teachers into our system? How can we affirm our students? Those are the things that we really need to work on. The last thing I would say is also asking our students. So in the county, we're really trying to look at how do we do empathy interviews, how do we understand their experience? Because in some of the films today, they talk about we are the ones that are going to fix the problem. We know what's happening to us, so we need to be able to explain our experiences so that we can address it and make it better for our Black students. But there's a lot of work to be done, is what I'll say.
If we're talking about Black students in the school system and just living free in their communities, in their habitat, if you will, and we think about violence and discrimination against Black students and people in general of the LGBTQ+ community, tell me what your hopes are for the next generation as we educate, as we become more aware and we move forward towards a sense of humanity.
First, I hope they see LGBTQ+ folks as humans. Because as we're looking at humanity, they would have to see me as a part of humanity first. I'm not sure if everyone knows, for the last 4 or 5 years, it's been more and more Black trans women murdered just because of their trans identity, which shows that there's a need for call to action, but is that call to action helping change what's going on? So I'm sharing all that to say, see me as a human first, and then hopefully at that point we can move more towards progression of hoping that instead of having allies, we can gain more accomplices to do some expansive work to do the fight for me, because my fight could actually end because my voice in a lot of spaces isn't uplifted. But if I had that accomplice that may be of a cisgender, heterosexual, binary type of individual that's screaming and yelling for that same fight, then more action is being put behind that. So that's what I'm hoping, with folks doing more expansive work in advocacy, that they actually move from being that person of an ally and they move towards more of that person of an accomplice. And for our young folks, just know that hope's out there. There's folks like me fighting for your safety. There's folks like me that is trying to be a representative for you. And if it's not safe to be you, I'm sorry. But think about your safety first until we can fight for everyone can feel safe, because that's what matters.
What are your thoughts about the weeds analogy in Chocolate Lens? Because there was a friend who had a strong response to that, and certainly it bears the question. We know that there are some in every neighborhood, in every community, that feels as though if the bad people are gone, oftentimes those bad folks are Black people and people of color, and the good people stay, then the neighborhood is made better. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that the weeds are the bad people, right? But let me ask you a question. What makes people bad, right? So when you look at our communities that have been impacted from the Great Migration on up until now, the disinvestment in education, employment, all those things, the people, so many people that never had opportunities. Well, how about the ones that never really learned to read, but they still made it in some way? So I would say it's the system that we are dealing with.
My question to you is, when you think about Juneteenth, when you think about the way that it is commemorated, when you think about the new conversations around it, and as we all go forward to live a free life as people in general, as humans, as Americans, is education enough for the Black person?
I think education is necessary, but not sufficient. So yes, you need it, but there has to be more. There are so, I mean, even in the movie we watched on voting, they were continuing to put obstacles in the way. It's like, oh, now you have to be able to read, the South Carolina Constitution. Like, now we're not going to teach you, African American studies in school. Like, there's going to continuously be barriers and obstacles that we're going to have to fight against. And so, I think education is a yes, but there are so many pieces of the system. I think Derek spoke to it that are tied together. So, yes, and is what I would say.
What kind of systematic changes do you feel is necessary to support those who have the education but really want to progress and make a difference? What type of systematic changes do you foresee being effective in that situation?
So much of it is systemic. And so I do think you have to look at these pieces and put things in place. We talk about redlining. Redlining here is, it's still impacting us today. So I feel like you have to have policies, process that actually go against those things that you've already put in place. People need to wake up and recognize it's not about this racist person or that bad person. It's about the system that we have. And so I know that's a larger answer, but I think there are different economic pieces, housing pieces, different pieces that the government and we as a community need to put in place.
How would you describe the importance of bringing young people to the table, and how do y'all do that in the work that you're doing today?
My thing that I do is I try to really elevate the importance of belonging. We say we believe in the future and what we're looking at, but are we if we're not even listening to the future's voice? First thing I say is, well, do we have a youth component that we can bring into the space too? So that folks can have that whole kind of more diversity and equitable things, because I can try to say and advocate, but I think the best voice is that person that may need that resource. So if we're talking about equitable services, then why is this young person not being in this space? I'm gonna continue. I think representation and belonging is real important, so yeah.
So for example, right now we run a program called Gateway, which is students who are expelled from their district schools come to this program. But the superintendent and I have been looking at the fact that it's all students of color that end up at Gateway. And so we need to understand these pipelines, number one, that get students to Gateway, but also what is their experience once they're at Gateway. You got all these adults in the room talking about how are we gonna change Gateway, how are we gonna redesign Gateway. It's like, what about the students? And so really talking to them and understanding their experience, it was just eye-opening. Even the fact that they're in one room all day. I was like, y'all don't change? And they're like, no, we just change subjects, get out your English now. It's like, oh no, you cannot be in one room all day, all year. So just things like that came from the students. The adults never mentioned that that's the structure.
It's really important to elevate the youth voice, but not just elevate their voice, but elevate their power too, right? And I think, when you can elevate the voice, but if the voice has no power to it, then it's really no elevation. So let's elevate their power too, so that we're building up, the next movement of leaders. Because I just think, what we're fighting today is going to be a generation beyond me that finally fights to solve this problem, right? Of where we are, of inclusion, equity for everybody. So let's elevate their power.
What we so often see in the news and social media these days is about controversy and conflict. In contrast, the Juneteenth celebration in our county have been about celebration, conversation, and collaboration. It is of equal importance that Juneteenth acknowledges the injustice and inequalities that have been endured. Celebrating Juneteenth raises an awareness that racism, bias, and inequality fester in darkness and silence. But it also raises an awareness that what resonates for most of us is that equity, inclusion, and belonging thrive in the light of open conversation, collaboration, and advocacy. Today we have shared a common experience in these films. We see what open eyes look for, and we hear what our hearts and ears listen for. We experience what resonates within us.
Soon as my eyes open each morning, they're on the prize. Pray for me, mama, 'cause your baby's changing lives. Pray for me, daddy, 'cause your boy is on the rise. And your son ain't gonna be set until his people feel the light. I'm meditating daily, my chakras need to be lined up. We gotta speak our truth, 'cause their numbers never defined us. Children of the Most High, crafted out of the stardust. I tell them keep their averages, nothing's average about us. Talking about creation, they couldn't make none without us. The ones that be, I'm tapping into those powers. Praying on my purpose like Panthers went on the prowl. Ain't got no time for waiting, my rollie is saying now. BS from the system, we ain't taking sitting down. You either stand up for something or die laying on the ground. How you say you for the town, dog, if you ain't helping out? You ain't trying to see us make it, you just trying to make it out. You either busy paper chasing or you running after clout. But we have to show our youngins that they have another route. They don't have to hit the trap. They don't have to whip it out. They don't have to give their talents to the choices of a scout. They don't have to jump around on stage with gold all in their mouth. All they really have to do is try their best and be themselves. You can be a firefighter. You can work in mental health. You can sit inside that cabinet, ain't talking about no shelf. You can be anything you want to be if we show you the steps. But before we go and lead our youth, we have to heal ourselves. For us, by us. Thank you. Thank you so much.